I'd like to preface this video by saying that the restrictions that we've been discussing in the last video have now been announced for English. So the restrictions on Barcgal, TikTok Worker, Night Runner, and Odysseus will apply from June 1st. So the 3 starters can be used as starters once again from June 1st onwards, and Odysseus can be used as a 4-of also from June 1st onwards. Now this is both for premium and for G format, so if you have one of these Spring Fests that are listed in this image, then unless Bushiroad says something otherwise, these rules will be effective in those Spring Fests, so do keep that in mind. This creates a slight problem in my opinion, because the new rules for Mulligan and Stride, especially Stride, haven't been introduced yet in English and we don't know a date for them either. My assumption is that once the new trial deck releases, that's when the rules go into effect, because I'm assuming that they would put those new rules in the rulebook, so that would make sense, meaning that normally these new rules will be effective for those Spring Fests, but honestly I'm not sure and it's kind of hard to say. Another very weird thing is that the Laurel restriction is from August 3rd, which is the VEB01 release date, which has Tachikaze, Spike Brothers, and Mega Colony. In Japan, the Laurel restriction matches the Dimension Police support date, which makes sense because you get new cards that you can replace Laurel with. Now we don't, we're gonna have to wait a month at least to wait for something to, you know, give us instead of Laurel that we can use. So that's a little bit silly. But the last one is the Purple Trapezist and the upcoming Jumping Jill restriction, in which you can't use the same one in both decks. That'll be effective from October 5th. So that's it, that's all I wanted to preface this video with, but now let's go into the actual meat of the video. Barcgal is one of the first starters to ever be printed in the game. This was the very first proper Forerunner that Royal Paladin ever got, and it saw really popular use throughout its time. Both while it was unrestricted as a starter and after that it was still seeing some use, but especially before that. Now in order to discuss why the card got unrestricted as a starter, I think it's important to go back in history and talk about how important this card was back in the day and the reason why it got restricted to begin with. So Barcgal's main skill is an act that allows it to rest itself and lets you search your deck for either a Future Knight Liu or a Flogel, call it the Rearguard Circle, and shuffle your deck. Now Flogel back in the day was just a vanilla stand trigger, but I'd like to point out that in the reboot, in the trial deck I'm assuming, or at least in the start decks, we're getting a new Flogel that is a critical trigger with 15k power. Future Knight Liu on the other hand was a 4k power critical trigger that allowed you to counterblast 1, slide him, Barcgal, and Flogel into your soul, and if you have a grade 1 Vanguard, use Superior Right into a Blaster Blade and shuffle your deck. Now, back in BT01 era, when this card was first released, it didn't have as much of an impact. Sure, you could call Barcgal behind the Vanguard because then you're going to go into Kingdom Knights Alfred anyway, and the fact that you're resting your Barcgal just to call something out isn't a big deal because you can't boost Alfred to begin with, and he's just going to profit from the extra unit being on the field. However, it was mainly in BT02 that Barcgal finally saw its true reign and supremacy because of the important duo of Soul Saver Dragon and Pongal. Now Soul Saver Dragon's skill is that when you ride it, you can Soul Blast 5 and give 3 of your Royal Paladin Rearguards plus 5k power. This might not seem like anything today because of the state of the game, but this was a pretty fearsome and big skill back in the day that actually led to Murakami Kazuya winning the national championship in Japan. If you want to read more about that, I recommend checking out Toya's blog. I'll leave a link to the article in the description. Now, Pongal's skill was an act, Kalmas 1, and slide him into the soul. If you have a Royal Paladin Vanguard, you search your deck for a Soul Saver, reveal it to your opponent and put it into your hand and shuffle your deck. Now, the importance of both Barcgal and Soul Saver is that with Barcgal, you're able to essentially secure your grade 2 ride. So that was one thing. You only had to worry about getting a grade 1, and then with Barcgal, you know, on turn 1 you call out your Flogel with a skill, on turn 2 you call out your Liu with a skill, use the Liu skill, 3 cards in the soul, you're on grade 2. So now you already had 3 cards in soul, and will potentially 4 with the Blaster Blade that was on your Vanguard circle. Then you use your Pongal while you're on grade 2, for example, if you had the extra open Counterblast, to essentially slide him into the soul and search for a Soul Saver. there you go, you have your grade 3 secured as well. This was a deck that could secure 2 of its grades without having to worry about anything past grade 1 really. But more importantly, through both Barcgal's and Pongal's skills, you just secured 5 soul, meaning that you're essentially riding Soul Saver for free and getting the skill off consistently every game if you time it right and you can finish it really fast on that turn. So one of the big strengths of Barcgal was that it was able to provide this soul for Soul Saver and essentially just secure both grade 2 and grade 3 rides together with Pongal. However, that wasn't its only function. I think that was the most important function and the one that actually led to its restriction, but the other very important part of Barcgal, and the one that pro players from back in the day will tell you is the most important one, is the fact that you could call Flogel for free. Now yes, Flogel is just a vanilla stand trigger, but it's a 5k boost nevertheless. Back in the meta that we had of BTO3, which was, well, BTO3 plus BTO6 for whatever reason, Royal Paladin players enjoyed the feeling of being able to get boosters out of their deck for free without having to worry about boosting because they're gonna go on Alfred anyway, and be able to make columns really easily, because a 5k booster with a good attacker is still gonna make magical numbers and still gonna pressure your opponent for a shield, meaning that you're essentially not wasting cards from your hand just to get more out of your opponent. And then, after BTO3 in English, Barcgal was restricted, and the only starter that Royal Paladin players could go for was Drangal, which was part of the Galahad Ride chain, until the release of Wingal Brave, which was then the go-to starter for Royals until this very day. Now, before I go into the reasons why I think Barcgal got unrestricted and what its effects are going to be on the meta, let's go over once again what Bushiroad themselves said about this. So, once again, I'm going to be translating myself on what it says in the Japanese PDF. So, Barcgal first Vanguard restriction, I made a typo there but never mind, to unrestricted. In terms of Royal Paladin decks, the mainstream first Vanguard choices are that of Wingal Brave and Milius. Therefore, it was decided that the impact on the competitive environment would be small. So essentially what Bushiroad is saying is that as the main choices for first Vanguards tend to be Wingal Brave and the new Milius, they felt that it wouldn't have that much impact to unrestrict Wingal. But I'd beg to differ. Now that Barcgal is unrestricted as a first Vanguard, I'd like to go over a couple decks that really profit from this. The first deck that I'm gonna mention, and I guess it's not so much of a, well, it's still a deck these days, but this doesn't profit from it the most, but it still profits a little bit, which is Thingsaver. So Thingsaver does require a Soul Blast of 3 on top of a Counterblast 2 in order to do its restand, skill. But you can obviously combo that by Counterblasting 4, Soul Blasting 6, back to back in order to do it double. And so because of that, you need a pretty high amount of soul. So in my opinion, Barcgal actually helps you to get that soul and therefore make the double restand skill even more consistent. But I think that's nothing in comparison to the other deck that I wanted to talk about that got this massive boost from the unrestriction, which is Sanctum Guard. I'd like to quickly mention that even with Barcgal's restriction, back when Sanctum Guard was the meta deck, a lot of the decks that we saw, especially in Japan, were main decking up to 4 Barcgals that they could call out and use, because that's how important Barcgal is to that deck. Sanctum Guard profits off of having units that are grade 1 or less. That obviously does mean that both Barcgal and any of the Flogels that he calls will be buffing up your Sanctum Guard. This both counts for the Limit Break grade 3, but especially for Sanctum Guard Regalia. And now with the new stride rules, I would say that's even scarier, because Sanctum Guard players are going to be able to stride into Regalia even if their opponent is crate stuck, and therefore I think that by going first, you can immediately use Barcgal to call out a Flogel. Go second, right up to grade 2, use the Barcgal to call out a Flogel. Go, third turn, you can, either call out something like a Limit Break Remover to already push with the Sanct Guard, or if you're going second, you can already take the stride if your opponent gave it to you, and there you go, you already have a Regalia with 3 grade 0s on the field, meaning you've got your 9k buff by doing nothing, by using Barcgal's skill twice, and honestly, I think that's pretty damn scary. Now, I'm not gonna say, Sanctum Guard tier 0, and I'm not gonna throw around big words here, But if you're going to be competing in tournaments after this restriction, both in the G and Premium format, I would recommend to keep an eye out for Sanctum Guard, because the moment they open that Barcgal and you know that it might be a Sanctum Guard opponent, I'd be a little bit careful, because the amount of numbers that they're going to be pushing out at a very easy rate by not really using up any resources from their hand is going to be quite scary. And I know once again that people are saying that yes, Flogel is just a vanilla stand, or in the reboot a vanilla crit, and why would you want to be losing triggers from your deck? But honestly, back in the day when people ran the old Flogel, they didn't care about the fact they're losing a stand because they weren't planning to use the stand anyway. It's kind of like with the effect stand triggers these days, like you're not really running them that much for the stand effect, you're running them for the actual effect that they have. So the effect of Barcgal is what made these stands worth running, and you didn't really care about the fact that you're thinning your deck of triggers, because in the end all you really wanted to do is to get a free booster, which is honestly a lot more valuable because it helps you push for magical numbers. So I hope this helped to explain why Barcgal was restricted in the first place, and well, Bushiroad's explanation on why it got unrestricted. I think it's gonna shake things up a little bit. It's gonna be very interesting to see what actually happens. I'm kind of hoping that we see a bit of Sanctum Guard topping here and there, so that I'm not actually just, you know, making stuff up and that it actually holds true. But I think that honestly, it's a pretty interesting choice. I have a feeling that we're gonna get a new Barcgal in the reboot regardless, and so I don't think it's gonna be as strong per se, but maybe a similar skill that's capable of doing something like that. But I don't think they're gonna release a starter once again just to restrict it like 3 sets later. But I think that's about all I wanted to say. So do let me know what you guys think, because I think this was probably the most interesting of all the restrictions that Bushiroad put up this time, and honestly the one that I feel like discussing the most, because I think it's gonna have the biggest effect on the meta. Like TikTok and Night Runner are pretty important, but Night Runner can't really do much when Nightcrow is restricted to 1, and then with Odysseus that's gonna be interesting, but with the new stride rules it won't be doing as much. But if it is unrestricted before the new stride rules, then that might actually lead to some interesting results. But that's gonna be it for me today. Do let me know what you guys think. If you played back in the day when Barcgal was around, what was your impression of it? Or were you also surprised when Barcgal got restricted? Because I remember my sort of thought of it was that like, oh, this, like, I remember a lot of people weren't screaming like, oh my god, it should have been restricted from the start. It was much more of a, oh okay, I guess that makes sense. And people were just kind of frustrated waiting for Wingle Brave to release, and that was about it. But yeah, I think Barcgal is a really interesting card, and overall pretty interesting to look at, and honestly I'm just curious what the upcoming tournament results are going to be like. But that's going to be it for me today. I hope you enjoyed these last 2 videos on talking about the restrictions. I didn't really want to make just like a video going like, whoa, this is the restriction and there you go. I wanted to analyze and talk about what this actually means, as well as give you a little bit of history behind especially Barcgal, who I think a lot of people don't actually know the reason why it was restricted in the first place. That's gonna be it for me today. Don't forget to hit the bell button, as well as check out the social medias in the description, as well as join the Discord channel if you haven't already. And on that note, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.